in recent days, we have been told that lockdown will continue for at least another 3 weeks. And I don't think that came as a surprise to anybody. And I think if we're being honest, I don't think any of us really thinks that lockdown will end in 3 weeks, but that it will continue for much longer than that. Now, how long precisely lockdown will continue is a matter of conjecture, and I'm sure you've heard, as have I, different accounts of when we might be able to come out of lockdown. And of course, not everyone may come out of lockdown at the same time, because those who are vulnerable may be required to stay self-isolated for longer than others for their own safety. Now, we entered lockdown during Lent, and we are now in Easter season. Easter Sunday was last Sunday, but you'd be forgiven for thinking, actually, it still feels like we're in the middle of Lent. And okay, we may not have celebrated Easter as we would like to have done. We weren't able to come together in person and celebrate in church as we would normally, but we still had Easter Day to look forward to. And I guess in a way, you can draw an analogy between what we might be feeling now and what we might be feeling immediately after Christmas, early on in the new year. The festival has passed, but we still have the cold, and we still have the wet, and we still have the short days with the dark mornings and evenings. And, we might be feeling low. Now, today is called Low Sunday. Well, that's one name for today, which is the Sunday after Easter. And you might well be feeling low. And if you are feeling low, then that is completely understandable. These are unprecedented times. Many of the things that we take for granted, we have been unable to do. Many of the things that give our lives meaning, we have been unable to enjoy. Not being able to see family who live apart from us, not being able to travel to see them, that has been a real bind. And I know that we can see them through the wonders of the internet, but nothing beats being able to see someone in person. Now, Jesus's disciples were human beings just like us, and just like us, they experienced a range of emotions, and they experienced a range of inner struggles. And I'm sure they would be feeling kind of similarly to the way that we're feeling at the moment. And analogy can be drawn between how they might have been feeling immediately after Jesus' death, before they became aware of his resurrection, to the way that we might be feeling now as we are looking forward to the lockdown ending. Now, Jesus' disciples sort of personified some of these struggles. In the most extreme case, Judas represented the struggle between loyalty and betrayal. On the other hand, Peter represented the struggle between proclaiming Christ and denying him. And the disciples struggled with each other. They argued over which of them was the greatest disciple. So Jesus's disciples weren't just human beings, but they weren't perfect. Weren't just human beings, but they weren't perfect either. And in our gospel reading today, which comes after Jesus' death, his disciples are experiencing fear, and they've locked themselves in a room. They're self-isolating, you could say. They are in lockdown, but it's not from fear of a disease that they've locked themselves away, but for fear that those who came after Jesus might also come after them, so that they're fearful for their own safety. And this is when Jesus appears to them. The door is locked, but he appears to them. He's dead, but he appears to them. He is the risen Lord. When they see him, they rejoice. But one of the disciples isn't there on that first appearance in the locked room, and that's Thomas. And Thomas personifies the struggle between faith and doubt, between belief and doubt. And when he's told about what has happened in that locked room by the other disciples, Thomas is a bit incredulous. He doesn't believe. And he says, "Unless I see the mark of the nails in his hands, and put my finger in the mark of the nails, and my hand in his side, I will not believe." And in Thomas's struggle between faith and doubt, we may see a struggle that we have ourselves experienced. And we don't have, perhaps you could argue, well, we don't have the benefit that Thomas had, that, he could reach out and touch, could see the risen Lord immediately in front of him. And we might feel like Thomas when this lockdown ends and the restrictions are lifted. And I suspect that the restrictions won't all be lifted at once, but they'll be phased out. And we might be thinking to ourselves, is this really over? Is everything going to be okay now? Is it safe to see my friends again? And so, like Thomas, before we can rejoice, we might need a little bit more time for the situation to sink in. Now, when Jesus comes back and shows himself to the disciples, Thomas is incredulous because this seems too good to be true. And when we come out of lockdown, we too may feel that this is too good to be true. And we may only believe it when we can hold our children or our parents or our aunts and uncles, when we can hold our loved ones in our arms again. And then that's when we can perhaps believe fully that lockdown is over. Now that's our hope, and that's what we've got to hold on to. And ultimately our hope is in the risen Lord. And the fact of Jesus' resurrection is a truth that we may not fully grasp at first. It may take us a whole lifetime to grasp that. Faith isn't always easy, and holding on to hope isn't easy either. And, we should be honest about that. And I think that's a lesson that Thomas can teach us, is that, belief may not come to us immediately. And we may struggle along the way, just as we may be struggling now with this crisis. But in the risen Lord, in our faith, we have hope. And however difficult that might be to cling on to, it is worth clinging on to.